Hello there. I've been looking into the concept of autistic flow this week, and it is making just so much sense to me in terms of my own lived experience of being autistic. And if you don't know what autistic flow is, it's essentially all of the good feelings that come from perhaps concentrating on a really interesting task or getting lost in your special interests, and how we really zone in and hyper focus on whatever we find interesting, really. So for this video, I'm going to be referring to this article that was published by the British Psychological Society, which is essentially about a new study that highlights the day-to-day importance of autistic flow. So this was a qualitative study, meaning that they did a really deep dive into the participants' experiences rather than a quantitative study where they would look at patterns within large numbers of people responding. Flow state is typically described as the feeling of time falling away as we become completely absorbed in an activity. For autistic people, this kind of deep immersion or autistic flow can be especially intense, and new research suggests importance for day-to-day functioning. And the researchers interviewed 10 UK-based autistic adults. So it's really important to remember that this is a really small-scale study, and they were asked open, flexible questions that allowed them to describe their experiences in their own words. Participants were treated as experts in autistic flow through their own lived experience, and were later invited to review the team's interpretations to ensure they felt accurate and true. And this reminds me of the Autistic Menopause book that was published recently by Dr. Rachel Mosley and Professor Julie Gamble-Turner, who had autistic experts involved in their book, who are essentially autistic people with lived experience of perimenopause or are in postmenopause. And I really like this approach into research into the autistic experience. So 3 main themes emerged, and the first showed how enjoyable flow states can be, and participants described flow as a source of real relief from everyday stress, especially when compared to noisy, unpredictable or socially demanding environments. Being in flow supported emotional regulation and a sense of connection to the self and others, with one participant noting that it helped them feel more calm and better able to understand their feelings when overstimulated. And for me, this makes so much sense. Being able to access autistic flow has been just so amazing for me at times in terms of my own mental health. And I remember in my 20s, I had essentially a breakdown, and I removed myself from society for a year. I was agoraphobic, and it was really autistic flow that helped me more than anything. I spent basically every day really involving myself in illustrating and painting, which I was really into at that time. And it was really this autistic flow that really was my saviour at that time, I have to say. The second theme focused on how autistic ways of being in the world can intensify experiences both in and out of flow. Participants described a characteristic depth of focus that helped them enter and sustain flow by filtering out distractions, often captured through metaphors such as tunnel vision, a bubble, or being in the zone. This depth of focus could be deeply engaging, and this makes so much sense to me. I just absolutely love getting lost in this zone. However, at the same time, this tunnel vision meant that interruptions were especially disruptive. Sudden sensory changes could severely cut through focus, making it hard to switch tasks or divide attention. In some cases, deep absorption was dismissively misread by others as being in a world of their own, rather than recognised as a meaningful or regulating state. And of course, this all falls in line with monotropism, doesn't it? The ability to really focus in on one task at a time, which means, and certainly in my case, I'm dreadful at multitasking. So I like to and need actually to have the time and resources available for me to be able to zone in on whatever it is that I'm doing that induces or brings about autistic flow. The final theme highlighted the importance of predictability. Participants described flow as something that required a sense of safety, closely tied to having control over their environments and knowing what to expect. Unexpected interruptions like sudden noise or changes in routine were often experienced as particularly intrusive and distressing, leading to emotional overloads or difficulty returning to flow. Yeah, I think this predictability is so important because I know that I wouldn't be able to get in the zone or be in autistic flow if my environment was unpredictable. So this, of course, makes it really difficult for us in terms of the workplace. You know, if we are in, say, an office or a factory or in a shop, it's really difficult to focus in on a task with all of these extraneous distractions. And I know for me, I'm finding it really difficult to talk to you right now because of the endless traffic outside of my window, which I often moan about, but just really demonstrates how difficult it is for autistic people to be able to get really absorbed in a task. Yeah, and it says it here actually. Even anticipating disruption could prevent people from entering flow at all, with some describing the state as quite fragile and easily broken. In response, participants developed deliberate strategies to increase predictability, such as choosing quiet times of the day to focus, setting clear boundaries with others, or selecting environments with shared expectations around silence, allowing them to feel safe enough to immerse themselves fully. I really hope this is only the beginning of research into autistic flow because with more evidence, we can set in place autistic accommodations and have workplaces that are set up for autistic people to thrive. So, in light of their findings, the team suggests that autistic flow should be reconceptualised away from a pathologising lens and towards something more positive and essential for well-being. For autistic people, flow may not be a sign of withdrawal or escape, but a rewarding, adaptive way of regulating, coping, and connecting with others, themselves, and the world. So I just love this framing, and it really does help me make sense of my experience of being autistic and this constant need actually for autistic flow has been so important to me my entire life. But what is really interesting, I think, is that a lot of onus is put on autistic special interests and how we get lost in things that we find really interesting. But through this study, I've been able to really think about what induces the autistic flow states in my life, and it's not always things that I'm that interested in. For instance, on Saturdays, I essentially clean the whole house and I get lost in the activity, and it really does bring about a kind of meditative state for me. And I enjoy it so much because I'm not able to do meditation through conventional routes or conventional meditation, but through bringing about autistic flow is the way that I'm able to enter a kind of similar kind of states, really. And also in terms of exercise, whether it be going on a walk or going out jogging, again, this can bring about this autistic flow state for me. And it's also linked in with creative flow. It's almost like there's kind of two types for me, or definitely two stages of autistic flow. The first being the kind of meditative state. So it's when my brain empties, and it's when it's almost like my brain and my body kind of feel a little more aligned. And it's once that I achieve this state, this is when all the ideas happen, as a creative person, as an artist. whenever I go out for a walk or a run in the morning, once I'm able to get into this flow state, this is when all the ideas happen, such as what video I'm going to make next on Creative Autistic. And I just love being in this autistic flow state so much. So it really is kind of redefining special interests for me, because very often it's not something that feels special to me. I don't see polymer clay as a special interest, really, but the specialness of making something through the polymer clay and bringing about this autistic flow state is where I want to be. It's not the special interest itself, it's the act of creating, it's the act of bringing about ideas, it's the act of autistic flow. And of course, it's really important to say that neurotypical people will experience something similar as regards to this flow state, but it just seems to be far more profound and far more important for autistic people. And I just love getting lost in this state so much. So I need to say a big thanks to Blindboy, actually, because he covered autistic flow and indeed this study on his podcast very recently, and I was just really struck by everything that he was saying. So I'm just really grateful that he covered this on his podcast. But I'd love to know if you also experience autistic flow and what it looks like or what it feels like for you, and if you've been able to put in place any accommodations that allow you to access autistic flow more easily. So leave your comments down below. So thank you for watching, and give it a like if you got this far. Comments, as I say, would always be appreciated, but if you don't know what to say, leave an orange hearts down below in comments for friendship, and I'll see you again soon.